Welcome to my video about life and light. In this video, we'll be talking about the flash of light at the moment of contraception. Oh, no, I mean conception. The electromagnetic spectrum and the double slit experiment. The Tibetan monks and the rainbow body. We'll look at DNA and the possibility that its code can be frequency and can be shown by the water memory experiment. There are 4 states of water. We would look at the 3 main common ones, and then we will look at the 4 uncommon one and its structure. First up, the basic frequency, light, and electromagnetic spectrum. It's visible to the naked eye from 380 to 700 nanometers in wavelength. This means on the electromagnetic spectrum there will be a visible light spectrum from the 380 to the 700 nanometers wavelength. The non-visible lights are radio waves, microwaves, infrared waves, ultraviolet waves, X-rays, and gamma rays. Now on to water. You have your 3 most common states: the solid, which is ice; liquid, which is water; gas, which is steam.
Water has a phase beyond the 3 that we ordinarily think of, the solid, liquid, and vapor. Gilbert Ling. He thought the water inside the cell was not like this, water in a glass. In the water in the glass, the molecules are bouncing around a fierce number of times per second, and they're all randomly distributed, randomly oriented. And he said, no, it's not like that inside the cell. Inside the cell, the molecules of water are lined up like soldiers at attention. And he had a good rationale for this. If you think of the water molecule as a dipole, like a bean with plus at one end, minus at the other, you can imagine those beans stacking on one another, where the plus of one sticks to the minus of its neighbor. And the first thing we did was to try to find this region of structure, of water structure, that Ling had provided evidence. And we found some features that are markedly different from what Ling had suggested, features that I think are critically important for an understanding of nature. Now, when you have ordering like that, the molecules are lined up. When molecules are lined up, it's like a crystal, actually a liquid crystal. And to obtain a liquid crystal, the original material has to be cleared of contaminants, because if it has contaminants, it's not pure. So it has to exclude the contaminants as the crystal forms. So we were looking for a region of water that would exclude contaminants. So we added contaminants. We used microspheres, little tiny spheres that are routinely used in science, in suspension of water. And into the water, we plunked a small gel as a kind of nucleating surface for something that might exist. And we looked in the microscope, and lo and behold, next to the gel, all sides of the gel, from the surface of the gel, we found that the microspheres were getting excluded, a so-called exclusion zone, which is what we called it because it excludes. And exclusion zone was perfect because EZ, you see, it works beautifully, easy to remember. After we studied the properties of this zone, we found that the properties bore almost no relation to ordinary water. Everything we measured was different, everything we could measure, but every property of this was different from ordinary liquid water. And so we then began calling it 4th phase water. So easy water, 4th phase, same thing. And I use those terms interchangeably. They're the same. I guess there are maybe a couple of major features of this that I should mention. One is the electrical charge. Now, water is neutral, and we had every reason to expect that this region would be neutral. And lo and behold, the EZ was negatively charged. We've measured this over and over, including up to today, and we find negative charge. There's got to be another zone of positive, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense, since you started with something neutral. So we looked, and we found that the positive charge was situated just beyond the exclusion zone. So the exclusion zone is negative, and the region beyond the exclusion zone is positive. That means you got a battery, minus, plus. And we confirmed, proof of principle, that it is a battery from which you can actually get electrical energy. So we put two electrodes in, one in the EZ, the other one in the positive zone beyond, connected it to an LED, and we could get the LED to light. It's kind of energy that biology uses, and it may use more than we think at first. As you know, you can't get something for nothing. It doesn't work. Even in Seattle, it doesn't work. And so you got a battery, but how did you get that battery? And the battery contains energy. You can't create energy. This is a foundational principle in physics, which I, believe makes sense. And history has shown that. And all you can do is convert one kind of energy to another kind of energy. So we're thinking, where does the energy come from to build this battery? One of the senior scientists in my lab, he was called away suddenly from his experiment, and he left the microscope light on overnight, and he found that the exclusion zone had grown enormously. Since the microscope light caused it to expand, maybe the growth of the EZ had to do with light. Which wavelength of light? A lamp contains many wavelengths, ranging from at the short wavelength and from ultraviolet to the medium, which would be the visible spectral range, longer wavelengths than red. And the results were clear. The ultraviolet did nothing to expand the EZ. Visible light did nothing to expand the EZ, except toward the longer wavelengths, we could pick up a little bit of expansion when we got to red. But infrared, just beyond the red, it was like gangbusters. It became clear that it's infrared light that builds. There's the energy that builds this battery. So one of the thoughts is that when the water passes through these surfaces, if the surfaces are hydrophilic, water loving, and there's plenty of infrared energy around, they're going to build easy water. And so the easy water excludes, but where the excluded debris, so to speak, winds up, I'm not sure, but I do know that for plants that grow, easy water is critically important, as important as it is for us. Our cells are filled with easy water. Our cells need to be filled with easy water for them to function properly. And the same is true in plants.
Recap, there's four states of water. The fourth state is the fourth phase water. The fourth phase water is a pure water, and it does this by pushing out every other molecule by making a tight, like army formation in its structures. Normal water is neutral, but the fourth phase water is negatively charged, which sits next to a positive area and makes a battery. From the experiments, they noticed it was light that was the power source by increasing the EZ zone. And I quote, "In him was life, and that life was light." It seems light is key for the body. I wonder if there's anything else similar. In this video you can see a burst of light at the moment of conception, and I quote, "In him was life, and that life was light." The Tibetan Buddhist monk has a culmination of spiritual practices which is known as the rainbow body, a practice of dissolving into light and energy after death or whilst transitioning into the spiritual realm, leaving no physical remains or sometimes only leaving hair or nails. This is known as obtaining pure enlightenment, which is also said to be a practice of fully transitioning from the physical realm. Light makes our fourth phase water. Light is present at conception. We see light at the end of life by the Tibetan monk's rainbow body process of dissolving the physical material into light and energy. So are we light? Are we unique and individual because we're different color light? No, we're not. The fourth phase water is increased by infrared light, so all fourth phase water is made by the same light. So what makes us different and individual? It's in our DNA. In this section I'll be talking about frequency and DNA, how DNA's code makes us individual, and how the DNA's code has a frequency. There's an experiment called water memory, and in this experiment we see if water can remember stuff. We put DNA into a test tube, dilute it so much so that you cannot test the DNA. Idea being, if we catch any frequency from the DNA test tube, then that could be the code. And if it is the code, we can put it with the physical materials and it should reconstitute the DNA first used. The difference between you and me is frequency. Our DNA is frequency. And as you know, light is also frequency. So are we frequency manifest? This is the double slit experiment. I believe it demonstrates how a propagation potential could materialize to become a physical material, where light can be a wave and a physical photon, where the observed propagation potential is measured, resulting in no potential, just propagation, as in no potential to be anywhere else than the measured location. Therefore, not a wave propagation potential, and in fact a measured photon propagation, which is physical matter. By using a photoelectric photon detector, they can detect photons and measure the location when detected, locking in the measurement for the photon to be in that location and nowhere else. Meaning it's not a wave but a physical matter with a physical locked location, whereas if there wasn't no photoelectric photon detector to measure the measurements, then there will still be a potential, and the photon could be anywhere which unknown until measured. We have a rugby team, say of 6, line up. They're all identical but facing away from you, and all you have is the numbers to differentiate them. How would you know which one's Harry? If I asked you to go and find out Harry, you would straight away identify him by looking at his face and then read the number on his back. You have measured Harry. He's the third one in and number 4. He's now got a locked location, which is the third one in, number 4. And he doesn't have a potential to be any of the others. After, we repeat the same one with the same candidates and the same lineup, but this time you don't know where Harry is again. How would you know which one Harry is? Once again, you have to identify him and then look to see which one he is in the lineup. So really, you don't know where he is until you identified him. Until you identify him, his potential to be any of them is high. When observing and measuring a non-physical light wave, it turns itself into a physical photon. So a quick recap, if we've got normal water and we had infrared, it then makes EZ water. So if we've got the EZ, then we add DNA frequency to the material DNA to make DNA, and we put these both together, then we get the human flesh body. Thank you for watching Life and Light by Between the Lines Knowledge.